Your client-side JavaScript is starting to mold. It's starting to resemble a fat spaghetti code, and it is time to add structure, but it won't take too long. Gotta get your truth out of the DOM. Take your data in the models that you cannot lose. We'll render out your models with the help of the views. And if you don't want your JavaScript to end up like a mess, it's time for the anatomy of Backbone.js at codeschool.
You're watching the Anatomy of Backbone.js. My name is Eric Allum, and in this level we're going to be going over level 4, models and views, and how they work together in a little bit more detail. So let's review our model view that Greg developed for us in the last level. As you can see, we have our template here, and we have our render function, and we can define a new instance of that view, passing in the model, render it, and then when we look at the output of the element, we'll have just a simple div with an h3. So what if we wanted to add a checkbox to this view? So we can change the template and add a input of type checkbox, and we're also going to make sure that if the status of our to-do item is complete, we'll go ahead and print checked, so our checkbox is checked. And then we'll finish off with putting our description there like before. So we have our checkbox in our view, but now we want to update our model when that checkbox changes. So how do we do that? So if you remember this diagram from level 1, you can see that our models provide the views with the data, and then it's the view's responsibility to build the HTML. So we can also go the other way. When a DOM event happens, it is the view's responsibility to handle that and update the model. Now that the model has the new data, it can update the server. Now let's jump back into our to-do view class and define a new event. Whenever an input inside of this view changes, we want to call the toggle status function, which would look something like this. In our toggle status function, we have our model, and we want to check if its status is already incomplete. We'll set it to complete, and otherwise we'll set the status to incomplete. So as you can see, this isn't the best code though. We have a lot of model logic in our view, but we can fix that pretty easily by a simple refactor. We'll update our view's toggle status function to call a model function of the same name. So we need to go back into our to-do item model and define this toggle status function. As you can see, it's doing the exact same thing as it was in the view, although now we don't have to call this.model, we can just call this.get and this.set. And now our code is better because our model logic stays in the model and out of the view. As you can imagine, we could call the model's toggle status function from other places in our app, and it would do the right thing. We want to sync this change to the server whenever we call toggle status on the model, so this is a good place to put our save call, which will do a put request to the to-do/id, in this case 1. Let's say that whenever our model status is complete, we want it to look like this with a strike through and a light gray text. How do we do that? Our designer has given us some CSS to make this happen. So to make this work, let's change our template and add a class onto our h3. And that class will be set to whatever the model status is. Now, whenever our model's status is set to complete, our new styles will be applied correctly. But how do we update our view when the model changes like we've seen in the last couple of slides? We could go back into the view's toggle status function and just call render after we've toggled the model status. And that'll do what we want, right? But what would happen if our model changed somewhere else in our app, like in a sidebar button that checked all of our items off? This wouldn't work. We need some way to notify our view whenever the model changes and re-render. Does that sound familiar? We can use model events like we saw in level 2 to notify the view whenever our model changes, and then our view can re-render and update the DOM. Let's see that in action. Back in our to-do view class, let's add an initialize function. Now this function is going to be called whenever a new instance of the to-do view is created. Inside of this function, we can listen for any changes on the model, and when that change event is triggered, we call the render function on the view. You might be wondering about that third argument, the this we're passing into the on function. Let's look at an example of listening for the change event on the model without passing in that third argument. And then we'll look at what changes when we do pass in that third argument. So here's our render function. As you can see, we're using the keyword this inside of the function. What the this refers to is the context of the function as it is called. As you can see, we're going to want the this to point to our to-do view instance. And usually this isn't a problem. But because of the way we listen to the change event on the model, when that change event is triggered, the render function is going to be called with the incorrect context. In fact, it's going to be called with the window context, which is the global object. So now in our render function, this will equal window, which is obviously not what we want. When we add that third argument back in, it's telling Backbone that when it triggers the change event and calls the render function, it should set the context of the render function to the to-do view instance. So when render is called, the this will be set to the to-do view instance and thus will work. Just like we listened to the model's change event and we re-rendered the view, we also are going to want to listen to the model's destroy event and remove the view from the document. To make this work, we have to define the remove function, and all that does is remove the element from the view. Now let's watch this in action. I've already rendered my to-do view onto the page, and now I have my to-do item and I want to update it. And as you can see, we're updating the description to pick up milk and cookies, and when that gets submitted, our DOM is updated. And now I just want to destroy that to-do item and I want to see that go away, just like that. That about does it for level 4. Have fun in the challenge area, and I'll see you back here in level 5 when we add collection.